Brandon Scott and Adam Spolane from sportsradio610.com here, coming off of the Astros 6-2 loss in game one of the World Series. Adam and I were both at Minute Maid Park for the game today. And Adam, let's just start with the biggest story of the day or of the night. It was, former Astro, Charlie Morton, breaking his leg early in the game. First of all, are you as confused as I am on exactly when he broke his leg? Because that didn't seem to be clear in the post game, at least from my vantage point. And then just overall, what did you make of Charlie Morton's performance and what happened to him and how that impacts the series going forward?
So it kind of sounds like obviously he hurt the leg on that comeback, or I can't remember who hit it now off the top of my head. Um, but I don't think he broke his leg on that play. It kind of sounds like it got progressively worse. And Brian Snitker said that because that was the first out, I believe, of the second inning was on that comebacker. So it would have been who hit seventh today? That would have been Gurriel. Yeah, so it was Gurriel up the middle, hits his leg. He gets the last two outs of the inning. And Brian Snitker said that he was kind of throwing a ball just against the wall in their dugout, trying to keep it loose. And it seemed like it was okay. And I think, if anything, that at bat with Jose Altuve, when he struck him out, I think that's when he might have fractured the leg. It might have happened during that at bat. So he threw 16 pitches after the Gurriel at bat, but I think that the legs seemed to just get progressively worse. Just as he kept throwing pitch after pitch after pitch, and obviously it sucks for him. That's the last thing you want to see have happen, especially at this stage of the year. You don't want to see a guy go down. And we didn't really hear from any of his old Astros teammates after the game today. But Michael Brantley just talked about how Morton's a good guy. They didn't play together here. Same thing, Dusty Baker. Everything you hear about Morton, that he's a great guy. But for the Braves side of things, it obviously it hurts. That was their game one starting pitcher. It's not a team that has a ton of depth there. I think their top three starters are pretty good. You've got Freed going tomorrow, and then Ian Anderson going for game three. But after that, it gets a little tenuous. So I don't know exactly how they're going to fill that void.
Let's switch over to the Astros pitching. Framber Valdez did not have anything close to the type of performance that he had toward the end of the ALCS. Only won a couple of innings, could never really get right, had trouble locating his pitches early on. What did you think of Framber Valdez, or maybe better put, what do you think went wrong with Framber Valdez today?
I think it's pretty simple. And you look at the home run that he gave up to Jorge Soler on the third pitch of the game. What was the count? It was 2-0. And the big thing with him is that when he gets ahead in the count, there are very few pitchers that are better. There are very few pitchers that are more devastating. And he couldn't do that today. He threw a first pitch strike to just 7 of the 15 hitters that he faced. He is a heavy ground ball pitcher, and the Braves don't hit a lot of ground balls, and they didn't hit any ground balls today. And they hit line drive after line drive after line drive. And sometimes with Framber, he'll give up some cheap hits through the infield. That didn't happen today. I mean, just about everything was well hit. They had the one infield single with Albies in the first inning, but aside from that, there was solid contact the entire day. That's a disappointing start, because you saw what he did in Boston on Wednesday, where he just shoved for 8 innings against a great hitting team on the road, and you thought that would have some carryover, and it just didn't. He just simply wasn't good.
You talked to Astros manager Dusty Baker after the game about Jake Odorizzi and the bullpen. Give me your thoughts on the bullpen and just how Odorizzi looked and how you think his outing. What did he go? 40 something, about 40, 43 pitches.
I think it was 42 pitches, I think, in 3 1/3. Struck out a bunch of guys. I thought he was terrific. I thought just the stuff looked good. The stuff looked crisp. I don't know. I asked Dusty just, when do you think that he might be available again in this series? And Dusty Baker said that it's too early to try and pin that down. But the fact that he only threw 42 pitches, it makes you think that maybe he would be available possibly for game 4. It's not a huge load that they made him carry. So I thought he was really good. I thought the guys that came in after him pitched really well. I mean, Maton pitched well, and it looks like that he's kind of going to be one of the Freddie Freeman guys as we get, especially in the middle innings. That's the guy that they're going to use for Freddie Freeman. Ryan Stanek was good. He kind of got a little unlucky on that ball to the right side. Brooks Raley came in. He faced Freeman. I thought he did fine against him. So I thought bullpen wise, I think they've got to be pretty pleased with what they got. I mean, the bullpen gave up 1 run over 7 innings against a pretty good hitting Atlanta team.
What about going into game 2? You called your shot earlier in the week or a couple of days ago on Twitter, and I think you reiterated again on In the Loop on Tuesday that you thought it would be a good idea for Luis Garcia to start game 3 and have Jose Urquidy start game 2, which is what ended up happening or what will end up happening. Just kind of go over for us again why you think that or thought that was a good idea, and what are you expecting from what's best case scenario from Jose Urquidy tomorrow?
So I said I gave 2 reasons why I thought they would go, or why I thought they could go with Garcia, or excuse me, why they could go with Urquidy in game 2 of Garcia. And the first reason was rest. And obviously we've talked about it plenty this year that Luis Garcia has thrown a lot more innings than he's ever thrown before. You look at what he did against the Red Sox on Friday. It was only a 76 pitch outing, but that was a that's the most stressful 76 pitches that he has ever thrown in his entire life. I mean, you look, that's a clincher in the ALCS, and that was a close game the entire way. So that's a lot of stress, and I do think that they wanted to give him an extra day, and by having him go game 3, you get him an extra couple of days of rest. And just listening to James Click do an interview earlier today, they talked about you give him some extra rest, and then you make it so that Urquidy doesn't have the really long layoff. Remember, he went 15 days between starts from the end of the regular season to game 3 in Boston, and that might have hurt him a little bit during that start at Fenway Park. The other reason was you look at what Urquidy does, and he gets a lot of fly balls. He's an extreme fly ball pitcher, one of the more extreme fly ball pitchers that there is in all of baseball. And so I thought you use him in game 2 because you can have your best defensive outfield on the field behind him, and you don't sacrifice anything offensively. You still have the DH. When you go to Atlanta, now all of a sudden you have to make the decision. Do we want our worst defensive outfield out there behind our pitcher who's going to get a lot of fly balls, or do we want to sacrifice offense? So obviously they're still going to have to make that decision, but with Garcia, he gets a few more ground balls, he gets a few more strikeouts, so you hope that the outfield defense doesn't come into play if you elect to go with your worst outfield alignment.
So since you brought that up, let's go on that topic real quick with what you should do when you go to Atlanta and have to operate under the National League parameters. Is it a no-brainer? I think that was a topic on Clint Sterner in the show today, whether it's a no-brainer that you should just shift everybody around, put Michael Brantley in right field, move Kyle Tucker into center field, and so you can keep Yordan Alvarez's bat in there at left field. Is it as easy as that? Is it as simple as that? Or I guess, how do you view it?
I don't think anything's a no-brainer at this point. I think that you have to have a discussion. You have to look at how can we be hurt by this? How can we be helped by this? I think that some games it's an easier decision than others. I think that for game 5, assuming that it's Framber Valdez who makes that start, that's an easy decision. That's your ground ball pitcher. The outfield probably doesn't come into play nearly as much. I mean, today notwithstanding, but the outfield doesn't come into play nearly as much when he's on the mound as it does when other guys pitch. So I think game 5, that's easy. Tucker in center, Alvarez in left, Brantley in right. I think for the same thing with Garcia in game 3, I think that you can probably go in that direction. I think game 4, it gets to be a little tricky depending on who's on the mound. So I think a lot of it has to do with matchups. Who are you facing? I think part of it has to do with who you're throwing that day. And so I think for me, I would probably go with the worst defense, but I think a lot of it also depends on where you're at in the series. So I don't think anything's necessarily a no-brainer, but I do think that's the direction that I would trend to. But you kind of have to see how things start to play out. What if, Brantley, what if, one of these guys, Brantley or Alvarez, they wake up and, their legs bothering them a little bit. Then obviously you have to kind of change up a little bit. And so I think it's all situational. You kind of have to see where you're at in the series, where you're at with who you're playing, kind of map out the games for how, Atlanta's bullpen, how does that look? So as you start to plot, all right, we could bring this guy in here, bring this guy in there. So I don't think that they are writing out their lineups for games 3, games 4, game 5 yet at this point. I think that's something that they'll go game by game and just see how things play out.
Real quick on the offense, and it feels a little silly sometimes to even have a discussion about the Astros offense and concerns about them since they've been one of the better offenses in baseball for years now. But what do you make? I mean, you look at some of their main guys who didn't do anything today. Altuve, Bregman, Correa. These are guys that are obviously proven in the postseason, reliable guys. What do you make of whatever the offensive struggles might be, or what are you seeing from those guys at this point?
I thought Correa was fine. He got on base. He had some quality at bats. Sometimes it just didn't go his way. The Bregman Altuve at bats were a little concerning just because you look, they came up 9 times. They went a combined 0 for 9. They struck out 5 times. I believe 4 of those strikeouts were called third strikes. So that's you don't see that very often, especially somebody like Bregman, who's really good at having a read on the strike zone and understanding what the strike zone is. And for whatever reason, he just wasn't seeing it today. So I guess that's a little bit concerning. Altuve hasn't had a real good postseason. He had some big hits in the Red Sox series, but he didn't have very many hits in the Red Sox series. But I guess you'd rather have the big hits than have a bunch of them. And then, in the big spot, he doesn't show up. Bregman hasn't had a great postseason, hasn't hit for a lot of power. I think that's been a little bit concerning, but it's one of those things. I think maybe you chalk it up to one game, maybe you chalk it up to, they know Morton's been really tough on them. Go back to the postseason in 19, you go back to the postseason last year. So they didn't have real good at bats. Those two in particular didn't have good at bats against Morton. And you have a bunch of pitchers that I don't think they've seen a whole lot of. I don't think they faced AJ Minter. I don't think they faced Tyler Matzik. I don't think that they faced Will Smith or Luke Jackson, very often, if at all. So I think part of it is you're just trying to learn your opponent at this point.
There was a question at the end of the game or after the game about pinch hitting for Martin Maldonado with runners on in the 4th inning. I know you've written extensively on the importance of Martin Maldonado, and the teammates and Dusty Baker, they've all spoken on it, on how it goes beyond just whatever his batting average is. But when you're looking at key situations, high leverage situations for the opposing pitcher where you are the aggressor, is it more of a question? Is it a little bit of a dilemma knowing that you can't really rely on Martin Maldonado for much offensively, and you need every run that you can get in the World Series?
Yeah, there was that spot in the 4th where I think they had runners at the corners and 2 out, and that would have been a spot where you say, okay, maybe you hit for him. And, Dusty Baker gave the reason that, for not doing it that I figured that he would give. It was too early in the game. They only have the second catcher on the roster, and the Braves have a whole host of left-handed relievers that they can go to. So I understood that reasoning for it today. That's going to be tough for them. Because Maldonado has been really a zero at the plate. If anything, he's been a negative at the plate throughout the season, and now obviously that's only been in the playoffs. But they're going to have to try, and I thought that they might go with 3 catchers just for that reason, so that they can, have the ability to use Castro in other places, and you still can use one of your switch hitters for Maldonado later on in the game. So I think that's going to be one of the tough things that they have to try and maneuver is, when can you hit for Maldonado? How do you use Castro, knowing that the Braves have 3 really good left-handed pitchers in their field?
That is Adam Spolane as they clean up at Minute Maid Park. I am Brandon Scott. We are with sportsradio610.com. Make sure you check out the website for our coverage of the World Series, and also listen from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And Adam, I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, sure thing.